Hey guys, this is John. I'm back on chess.com solving tactics. Last time I left off, I was 1563. I've got a nice little streak going on here. Let's hope it continues. I'm going to switch up my strategy a bit this video. Instead of talking you guys through the tactic and listing all my thoughts as I solve them, I'm going to try to solve as quickly as possible and then explain my thoughts afterwards. Because the way the chess.com algorithm works, it rewards speed. And even though we're focusing on solving for accuracy, I do want to rise up the tactics training ladder a bit myself. So I'm just worried if I take too long, I'm going to get stuck at a certain rating. So we're going to do this a little bit backwards and see how it goes. So with that, let's get started. White to move on this one. Black has played f5, opening up an attack on the knight. I'm still going to talk a little bit, by the way. I might just defer some decisions and explanations for later. Knight e6 looks good. I'm going to do that. So we get to take back here. Yeah, so the reason why we played knight e6 is that this attacks the queen on d8 and also hits the bishop on g7, so it's a fork. And notice that the knight on d7 is pinned. So black is somewhat cramped here, and after this capture occurs, trying to remove the forking piece, so bishop takes on e6, d takes e6 in reply, that knight is still pinned, and we're going to win a piece because we'll take it next move. There weren't really any forcing moves that caught my eye. Bishop takes d7 check. You don't want to give up a bishop for a knight for no reason. If that bishop is pinning that knight, don't sell out cheap. Also, knight e6, I was cued into this move because black was opening up the attack on the knight on d4, so it stands to reason we might want to move that attacked piece. Pretty straightforward puzzle, I think. We could look at some captures on f5 perhaps, but knight e6 is very clear. So let's go to the next one. So white's bishop is under attack, but white does not even move it. So first thing I look at, can I take that piece? If I take it, I suppose knight d5 may be an issue. I also notice there's bishop to c6 skewering white along this long diagonal. That looks quite good. I just wonder which move is better, taking on g5 or bishop c6. I would lean towards bishop c6 because if the queen moves, we get the rook on h1. A rook is better than a bishop. Also, if f takes g5, white could play h takes g5 and open up the rook. So I don't see any other forcing moves. I think I'm going to go with this one, bishop c6. And then let's take off this piece. We are up an entire rook. We solved it correctly. We gained 11 points. So in this one, you were presented with two tempting possibilities. Either taking the bishop or this bishop c6 move. And I suspect many people who get this one wrong just automatically capture on g5 without any particular thought. But if we explore that variation, so h4 take here, white can recapture, and they've got their queen coming into h7. So now if we do this one move later, white is on the offensive. And actually, we're just getting mated, aren't we? Bishop h5. Can't even block with the g-pawn. So there was a false path there. And by the way, I know I'm going a little quicker, so feel free to pause the video before I start talking about the problem if you want to try to solve it before I say anything. So let's go to the next one. Black has captured on a2. Well, this bishop on g7 is pinned, and black's queen is awfully far away from their king. There's not many forcing moves to look at. Knight h5 is the move that should come to mind pretty quickly because we're threatening queen takes g7 mate. The only piece that could help black defend that bishop is the queen, so queen b2, but then we can throw d4 in there, and that is a interference move. The queen is trying to hold the bishop long distance, but we throw that move in. Now we just got to take the free queen, and we've got checkmate coming up on g7. Hot and fresh out the kitchen. Okay, so we gained 13 points on that one. So that was just a interference tactic primarily. Knight h5, not hard to find. You're just pumping up the pressure on the pin piece. And black has only one good way to respond, and that's queen b2. Can't go to a1. That's covered by the rook. No other aggressive moves or anything black can play. Black is underdeveloped, as you can see. He doesn't have the light square bishop in the game. The king side is blown open. So queen b2, and we would just want to foresee that d4 disrupts the coordination. Note that d4 is better than e5. If e5 is played, then queen takes e5, and black would be offering a trade of queens. Technically, white could win a rook in that transaction. e5, queen takes e5, queen takes e5. let's say bishop takes e5, bishop takes a8, but checkmate is better than a rook. So let's continue. Bishop takes d5. So we can recapture, but usually these tactics are not simple recaptures. Usually there's something deeper here. But, I mean, queen d4, attacking the rook on h8, that's one move I see. Kind of an odd problem. Bishop g5, attacking the queen first. Does that have merit? Bishop g5, f6, queen takes d5. The idea being f takes g5, queen e5 check, maybe? Well, I guess we just take with the queen, and then we're hitting the rook, and we're threatening queen e5 at the same time. But what if knight c6 in reply? What then? Blocking us and defending e5. Can't be pawn takes d5. Pawn takes d5 looks much too slow. So I would rule that out quickly. So queen takes d5, knight c6. What's the killer idea? Knight e5? That could be it. Then we're hitting the knight, and we're also threatening mate on f7. If queen e7, knight takes c6. I'm going to go with that. Yeah, now this move. So black covers mate, but we have this. And after he recaptures, now we're going to get a fork on the king and the rook. Okay, so I was skeptical whether there was something truly crushing from the beginning, because it just seemed like a forced recapture, choosing between queen takes d5 or pawn takes d5. No real forcing moves beyond those two captures, no checks or anything. I looked briefly at queen d4. I think you'd want to at least consider that for a few seconds. It does hit the rook in the corner. Black has played g6, so they're weak on this diagonal. But yeah, taking with the queen creates an immediate threat on a8. Black can respond with knight c6. Note that if pawn c6 in that position, then queen e5 is the auxiliary idea in addition to attacking the rook. So queen e5, forking the king on e8 and the rook on h8. So for all intents and purposes, knight c6 must be played, and then knight e5, creating a double attack once again. Hitting c6 twice, threatening queen takes f7 mate. Black has to respond to the more severe threat, so queen e7, and now we take here. And after the recapture, we've got a fork on the king and the rook. Nifty little problem. Keeping the train moving. We're at 1612. D takes e5. So if I take with the knight on e5, again, another recapture, I notice that if white takes, they lose the rook on h1. And how does white deal with this knight being attacked twice then? They can't move it anywhere without losing the rook, nor can they reinforce it. I don't see anything else that would trip us up. Maybe we would think about rook e8 for a minute, but in the interest of keeping the pace going and trusting our instincts, I'm going to go with this. So another problem related to recapturing, perhaps. I can't see too many people preferring pawn takes over knight takes. Knight takes is much more active. Our knight isn't doing a whole heck of a lot on f7. So knight takes e5, overloading the knight on f3. Yeah, just not many other moves to consider. Again, no checks or captures. Let's keep going. Black takes on f4. So the automatic move would be queen takes f4, reestablishing material. Even though I haven't been strictly talking about the material count, that's just in the interest of time and trying to keep things moving. But I'm always keeping an assessment of the material. Black is currently up a piece with that capture. So queen takes f4, we attack the knight. If this knight moves, maybe black has trouble on f7. Is there a reason to insert some other move, like taking on a5 or c5, or taking on c6 even? I don't see one. I suppose if queen takes on f4, black will play knight d6. And what's the follow-up there? Knight takes c6, queen takes c6. That's nothing. B takes c5. There's just queen takes c5. I also don't see much there. So before playing this, I want to make sure if there is an idea, a follow-up after knight d6, that I've figured it out. This bishop is a bad piece. I don't like it very much. Maybe it's just b5. So queen takes f4, knight d6, and then b5. This bishop is lacking squares, isn't it? And our knight on e5 does a brilliant job of controlling d7. So we can crowd that piece, and I think we're going to win it. Yeah, I'm going to go with this. And now this move. So keeping the pawn tension there and not taking on a5 or c5 turned out to be handy. I was wondering if after queen takes f4, there were any other moves black could play, like g6 crossed my mind, defending the knight. I suppose if g6, we could still play b5, and that bishop is simply lacking squares. Maybe this problem could have continued one more move if black plays f6, attacking our knight. But in that case, if I switch over to the analysis mode, so if f6, I think knight takes c6 is good. And then after pawn takes c6, queen takes d6, white is bagged a piece. No compensation for black. Next problem. Black plays a5, seemingly abandoning his king. Queen h6 is the first move I'm analyzing here because it threatens queen takes h5. I like our rook on the g-file poised. White is up in exchange here. They have an extra rook for one of black's minor pieces. So it makes me think that exchanges are not necessarily bad for us. But check this out. The knight on e7 is loose. And so is that knight on h5 in effect. So if we play queen g5, we're hitting both of these pieces. And black is just going to lose something. Queen g5 was a double attack. It wasn't the first move I looked at. I looked at queen h6 earlier, but I think the deficiency with queen h6 is that it was one-dimensional. Queen h6, we're only threatening queen takes h5. My very first chess coach told me that the double attack is the key to chess. And after queen g5, we're doing exactly that. Attacking two of the black pieces, both the knights. And black just has to choose which one they want to lose. If knight g7, we take e7. No other threats that we have to worry about. There is this open b file, so I could understand black playing queen b7, defending the knight and trying to attack down the file. But realistically, after queen takes h5, if black were to continue with rook b8, just b3, we will easily diffuse the threats that black has on the queen side. Keeping things rolling, I'm up to 1643. So here, open position. Our king is looking mighty exposed, but we have the move. White is counterattacking our rook, so I'm looking at discoveries because our queen is on the same diagonal as the white king. So any move we make with this rook will be a check. We want to make sure it's the best check, though. The first one I looked at was rook takes f3 check, but you know what I think is better is this move. So let's do this, and then we're going to pick up an entire rook. So a tempting choice of discovered attacks right there, and you can be pretty safe that it's not going to be a queen move. We could make a queen move just to get the queen out of danger, but then that gives white possibilities with like rook g8 or even stepping away from the discoveries with king h1. So you'd want to look at those rook discoveries like rook takes f3. But if rook takes f3 there, then we're letting white off the hook easy. Rook takes d6. They can scoop up our queen. We scoop up theirs with check. But after this, it seems to me that white's just going to be up a pawn in the resulting endgame. So as the old advice goes, when you see a good move, sit on your hands and look for a better one. That goes for many of these tactics. There might be a move that just springs to mind, but if we look a bit further, rook f6, delayed gratification. We're not picking up material immediately, but we're blocking the attack on our own queen. And after the king moves, or white responds to the check in some way, we can take on g6. We've got two attackers. They only have one defender. Note importantly that white cannot block on g3 and save the rook because we just take. So that's not working for them either. Good session so far. I'm going to solve a couple more. Bishop takes a3. So this king is looking pretty boxed in. There we go. that one was pretty easy. That was just a checkmate in one. So I guess you'd be looking at all the checks here, of course. So rook e5 by either rook, but the black king is always escaping to f6. White has a perpetual if they want. So bishop takes a3, huge blunder. That just throws the game away. Otherwise, black might be winning because the bishop on b2 does a good job of controlling e5 and also acts as a potential blocker on f6. So yeah, that's a double question mark move at least. So you'd want to look at these moves. White does have a perpetual like this, but rook f7 is mate. No two ways about it. Pawn on f3 does a good job of controlling the g4 flight square. 1666. Queen e8. Okay, so offering a queen trade. We've got a queen and knight in close proximity to the enemy king. That means there might be mating threats abounding. I'm looking at the checks. This position looks dangerous, especially with us having these doubled rooks. So knight f5 check and also rook takes g5 are the two moves I'm looking at here. If knight f5 check, king g8, I'm just going to look at that one first because it's forcing. Queen h6 threatens mate. So does rook takes g5, though. Rook takes g5, we can continue the forcing sequence. That just seems to be mate, right? Knight takes g5, rook takes g5, f takes g5, queen takes g5, king h7, queen g7, checkmate. Could I start with this move? That's just a matter of move order now, but I could also try to start with rook takes g5. There might be some possibilities with the king coming to h7, so I'm going to play this one first because the king specifically cannot go to h7. And now we go bombs away on g5. We're trying to get our queen to the g7 square eventually. That's the whole idea with this sequence. Yeah, now we can just mate him like so. So a bit of a move order thing there. I think rook takes g5 immediately looks very, very enticing. If you're not spending time on knight f5 and rook takes g5 in this position, like those should be your top two moves, then you're missing something. I mean, you might look at queen takes e8. That's the next most forcing move, aside from moves like queen g6 or queen f7. But you want to be focusing on those checks and seeing whether you have an absolutely forced mate, because we've got so much firepower coming down on the black king. Like I said, queen and knight in close proximity, two doubled rooks. It'd be hard to believe that there isn't something close to mate or either a direct mate. So if this right away, I was just worried that after this sequence, then the king is going to escape to h7 or even black can block on g6 at the very end. Could we play in this position knight f5? Would that transpose? That may work because after here, rook takes g5, that works out the same way, does it not? So maybe we could start with rook takes g5 all the same. Yeah, in that case, it would work the same way. Unless pawn takes here and then king f6, perhaps? Does he slip away via e7 to d8? That might be the case. So the virtue of knight f5 is that it's the most forcing. Black only has one move they can play, king g8. Whereas if we start with rook takes g5, they can take either way. And maybe that f takes g5 recapture allows black to get out of dodge with their king. Get over to d8 as quickly as possible. So nice sequence as played, starting with knight f5 and then sacrificing, limiting the opponent's options. And however this plays out, our queen is getting to g7 or g6. Let's do one more. Ooh, this will be a fun one. Windmill tactics. I can sense it. So we've got our bishop on d5, rook on g2. I'm looking at discoveries. We're down a lot of material. We need a strong discovery. So take the bishop first. If he takes on d5, we're not worried about that. But he can play rook f3. What if I check on e2? That would win the queen, but is that the best? I could also move my rook back somewhere and check. So rook pretty much anywhere on the g file. That would win the queen. They'd have to sacrifice on d5. What is best here? There's rook f2 check. King g1, though, in that case. This rook is not going to be helping us much. Just thinking if after check rook f3, there's some way we can really just kill white. I don't quite see it. Whereas rook e2 and moving the rook up the g file means we get up the exchange. Seeing if there's anything different about moving these pieces up the g file. They're all pretty much the same. Queen takes d5 will be the answer in any case. Rook takes c2. Sometimes you can play a strengthening move in these positions, like a quiet move. I'm not seeing it, though. Yeah, I think we're going to settle for rook takes c2, rook f3, and then what? That's the big question. I want to get that other rook into the game. If just bishop takes f3, king g1, white is kind of getting away. And we have a threat on e6 to worry about. So maybe king f7 after rook f3, like not take that rook quite yet, but he has king g1. Yeah, interesting little problem. It's a question of which is the best winning method. Clearly, we're better in every line we're looking at here. But what's the best line? I kind of just want to go with the exchange, but no, I'm gonna go for max material. Really, and he does that. So rook f3 would have been much better because this is a straightforward solve after this. King h1. If we were to continue this line, let me go to the analysis. I don't like that problem because rook f3 was more tenacious for white. They should block this way because, as played, after king g1, the problem just stopped here. Rook g2, we're going to go back and do this windmill again and win the queen. We're just up too much material. So this is a somewhat flawed problem because after this, rook f3 is definitely the best move and probably the only try. And as I was saying, black can grab some material here and maybe king f7 now. But the game continues. White has a queen for 2 rooks and a bishop. Black's king is a little bit open. Definitely black should win, but it's not over. So every once in a while you run into tactics like that that don't fit perfectly well in a tactics module. So good example of that right here. I'm not gonna report it, but I might make a comment on this one. Anyways, I'm going to stop here. Hope you guys enjoyed this tactics video. Let me know what you think about this format where I'm just solving more for speed. Well, still explaining some stuff, but not trying to explain everything before I solve it. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye, guys.